The gilded cageless Monroe stood before the full-length mirror in the Grand Estate's master suite, barely recognizing the woman staring back at her. The ivory silk wedding gown clung to her slender frame, a beautiful prison, each pearl button fastened with trembling fingers. Just an hour ago, her chestnut hair had been swept into an elaborate updo, tiny white roses woven throughout, but all she could see was the fear swimming in her hazel eyes. Tonight marked the beginning of her new life as Mrs. Theodore Ashworth, wife to a man she had met exactly 4 times before their wedding ceremony. Before we begin, I kindly request that you please subscribe to my channel. Now, please share in the comments where you're watching from. The arrangement had been made swiftly, efficiently, like a business transaction, which Celeste supposed it was. Her father, Judge Nathaniel Monroe, had brokered the deal with Theodore's family over brandy and cigars. Theodore owned 3 steel factories and came from old money. Her father needed political connections and the prestige of such an alliance. Celeste's wants had never entered the equation. Whispers in the dark. She moved toward the fireplace where flames crackled and hissed, seeking warmth that refused to penetrate the ice coating her insides. Her fingers traced the mantelpiece, feeling the carved wood beneath her touch, grounding herself in something tangible. The older women in her social circle had prepared her with veiled warnings about wifely duties, about endurance and sacrifice, about closing your eyes and thinking of something pleasant until it was over. Their words had planted seeds of dread that now bloomed into full-blown terror. Celeste's hands instinctively moved to her upper arms, feeling the raised texture of scars hidden beneath layers of silk and lace. 17 marks in total. She had counted them so many times, she had memorized their locations like a map of pain. Each one represented a lesson her father believed she needed to learn about obedience, about proper behavior, about being the perfect daughter. The riding crop had been his teaching tool, applied with cold precision whenever she showed too much spirit or questioned his authority. The stranger entered. Bedroom door opened with a soft click, and Theodore Ashworth stepped inside. Celeste's breath caught in her throat. He was handsome in an understated way, with dark hair that fell slightly across his forehead and blue eyes that seemed to observe everything with quiet intelligence. He still wore his wedding suit, though he had removed his jacket and loosened his collar. At 6 feet tall, he cut an imposing figure, and Celeste found herself instinctively stepping back. Theodore stopped immediately, his expression shifting from neutral to concerned in an instant. He raised both hands in a gesture of peace, staying near the door. His voice, when he spoke, was gentler than she expected. "Celeste, you look absolutely terrified. Are you afraid of me?" Pride warred with honesty in her chest, but the truth spilled out before she could contain it. "I don't know you. I don't know what you expect from me tonight." He studied her for a long moment, those perceptive blue eyes seeming to see past her carefully constructed facade. Then he did something completely unexpected. He walked to the sitting area by the fireplace and settled into one of the burgundy velvet chairs, gesturing to the one opposite. "Then let's change that. Come sit with me. Just talk. Nothing more." An unexpected affairs-lust approached cautiously, as one might approach a wild animal, unsure whether it would attack or flee. She perched on the edge of the chair, her spine rigid, ready to bolt at the first sign of danger. Theodore poured 2 glasses of wine from the crystal decanter on the side table, offering her one. Their fingers brushed as she accepted it, and she was surprised by the warmth of his touch, the lack of aggression in the gesture. "I want to be very clear about something," Theodore began, his tone serious but kind. "What happens between us tonight, or any night, will only happen if we both genuinely want it. You are my wife legally, yes, but that doesn't give me ownership over your body or your choices. I believe in consent, in mutual desire, in treating my partner with respect and dignity." Celeste stared at him, her mind struggling to process words she had never expected to hear from any man, let alone her husband. Her father had taught her that men took what they wanted, that a woman's role was submission and acceptance. Yet here sat Theodore Ashworth, voluntarily limiting his own power, offering her a choice. She thought she had lost the moment. She signed the marriage certificate. Why would you say that? The question emerged as barely more than a whisper, suspicion coloring every syllable. Years of cruelty disguised as care had taught her to distrust kindness. Theodore leaned forward slightly, his elbows resting on his knees, his expression earnest and open. Because I was raised by a mother who believed that character is measured by how we treat those who have less power than we do. Because I've seen too many men abuse their positions of authority and call it their right. Because I want our marriage to be a partnership built on trust and affection, not fear and obligation. Cracks in the armorsome thing in Celeste's chest loosened slightly, like a knot being gently tugged. She sipped her wine, using the moment to study this man who was now legally bound to her for life. His face held no malice, no hidden cruelty lurking behind practiced smiles. Instead, she saw patience and something that looked remarkably like genuine concern. "Tell me about your art," Theodore said, shifting the conversation with effortless grace. "I noticed several paintings at your father's house during our engagement dinner. The landscape with the waterfall was particularly striking. The way you captured the light through the mist was extraordinary. Warmth flooded through Celeste, different from the wine's effects, different from the fire's heat." Someone had noticed her work, really noticed it, beyond polite pleasantries. "You saw those. Most people walk right past them." "Are not most people," Theodore smiled, and the expression transformed his entire face, revealing dimples she hadn't noticed before. "I could see the emotion in every brushstroke. There's a story in that painting, something about freedom and movement. I found myself wondering what you were feeling when you created it." Celeste's fingers tightened around her wineglass as memories flooded back. She had painted that piece after a particularly brutal lesson from her father, channeling her pain and longing for escape into swells of blue and green. The waterfall represented everything she couldn't have, the freedom to simply exist without fear, without constantly monitoring every word and gesture for potential punishment. "I paint when I need to feel something other than trapped," she admitted, the truth slipping past her defenses. "It's the only time I can express what's really inside me without consequences." Theodore's expression grew more serious, his eyes searching her face with increased intensity. "Trapped, Celeste, has someone been hurting you?" Her hand moved automatically to her shoulder, fingers pressing against the silk, covering old wounds. She caught herself and quickly lowered her arm, but Theodore had noticed the gesture. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. The first truth silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken truths. Celeste felt the weight of 17 scars burning beneath her clothing, each one a secret she had guarded fiercely. No one knew. The servants suspected, but never spoke. Her mother had died when she was young, taking with her any potential protection, and her father's position as a respected judge meant his word was law, both in the courtroom and at home. "You don't have to tell me anything you're not ready to share," Theodore said quietly, breaking the silence with careful words. "But I want you to know something important, Celeste. Whatever happened to you before today, whoever hurt you, they will never touch you again. You are under my protection now, and I take that responsibility seriously." Tears pricked at Celeste's eyes, and she blinked rapidly, refusing to let them fall. She had learned long ago that tears were weakness, that showing vulnerability only invited more pain. Yet something in Theodore's steady presence made her want to trust him, made her want to believe that perhaps not all men were like her father. "My father," she began, then stopped, the words catching in her throat. Theodore waited patiently, not pushing, simply being present. She tried again. "My father believes in discipline, strict discipline. He says he was preparing me to be a suitable wife, molding me into someone worthy of a good match." Understanding dawned in Theodore's eyes, followed quickly by carefully controlled anger. "How long has this been happening?" "Since I was 13. 10 years now." The admission felt like releasing poison from her bloodstream. He would use a riding crop, always careful to strike where clothing would hide the marks, always with a lecture about my failures, my inadequacies, my need for correction. Theodore's hands clenched into fists, but his voice remained gentle when he spoke. "Celeste, that's not discipline. That's abuse. Nothing you could have done would justify that treatment. Nothing. The unveiling Theodore stood slowly, his movements deliberate and careful, as if approaching something precious and fragile. Celeste watched him with wide eyes, her heart hammering against her ribs. Every instinct screamed at her to protect herself, to rebuild the walls she had just begun to crack open. But something in his expression held her in place, something that looked like fierce protectiveness mixed with profound sadness. "May I come closer?" he asked, stopping several feet away. The question itself was revolutionary to Celeste. No one had ever asked her permission for anything. Decisions were made for her, about her, without her input. Yet here stood her husband, waiting for her consent before even stepping into her personal space. She nodded, unable to find her voice. Theodore closed the distance between them and knelt before her chair, bringing his eyes level with hers. The position was one of supplication, of equality, and it made tears finally spill over onto Celeste's cheeks. "I need you to understand something," Theodore said, his voice thick with emotion. "Those scars on your body, they don't define you. They don't diminish your worth or your beauty. They are evidence of your strength, proof that you survived something unbearable. And if you would allow me, I would very much like to see them. Not because I need proof of what you've told me, but because I want to know every part of you, including the parts you've been forced to hide." Courage in vulnerable assault's breath came in short gasps as she processed his words. Her entire life had been about concealment, about presenting a perfect exterior, while hiding the damage beneath. The idea of voluntarily exposing her shame to another person felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, wind howling around her, uncertain whether she would fall or fly. "I don't want you to be disgusted by me," she whispered, voicing her deepest fear. Theodore reached up and gently cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away her tears. "Celeste, I could never be disgusted by you. Never. What was done to you was disgusting. The man who hurt you is disgusting. But you are remarkable." She searched his face for any sign of deception, any hint of the cruelty she had learned to recognize in her father's eyes before he struck. She found nothing but sincerity and something that looked remarkably like admiration, making a decision that felt both terrifying and liberating. Celeste stood and turned her back to him. "The buttons," she said quietly. "They're down the back of the dress." Theodore rose to his feet, his fingers finding the first pearl button at the nape of her neck. He worked slowly, methodically, each button released with care and patience. The dress loosened gradually, and Celeste felt cool air touch her skin as the fabric parted. When the last button was freed, the gown slipped from her shoulders and pulled at her feet, leaving her standing in only her silk undergarments. The map of paint chemise was thin enough that shadows of marks showed through the delicate fabric. Theodore's sharp intake of breath told Celeste he could see them. Her hands trembled as she reached for the hem of the chemise, but before she could remove it herself, Theodore's hands covered hers. "Let me," he said softly. "Please," she nodded, and he lifted the garment over her head with reverent care. Now she stood before him, bare from the waist up, 17 scars crisscrossing her back and shoulders like a grotesque tapestry. Some were thin white lines, barely visible in the firelight. Others were thicker, raised, testament to particularly brutal strikes. They formed a pattern of systematic abuse that had been inflicted over years. Theodore was silent for a long moment, and Celeste felt panic rising in her chest. She had made a mistake. He was repulsed. He would reject her now, send her back to her father's house in disgrace. But then she felt his fingertips, feather-light, tracing the longest scar that ran from her left shoulder blade down to the middle of her back. "This one looks older," he observed, his voice rough with suppressed emotion. "I was 14, Celeste replied, her voice surprisingly steady. "I had snuck out to attend an art exhibition without permission. When he discovered where I had been, he said I needed to learn that disobedience had consequences. That was the first time he drew blood." Theodore's hand moved to another scar, this one across her right shoulder. "And this one, 16. I had refused a suitor he had chosen for me. I told him I wanted to pursue my art instead of marriage. He said I was being selfish and foolish, that I needed to understand my place. The memories flowed more easily now, each scar releasing its story like pressure from a wound. There's one on my left arm from when I was 18. I had asked if I could use part of my dowry to open a small gallery. He called it the most ridiculous idea he had ever heard, and ensured I understood the gravity of my presumption. Rewriting the narrative, Theodore continued his exploration, his touch gentle and reverent, as if he were handling something infinitely precious. When he had traced every visible scar, he placed both palms flat against her shoulder blades and rested his forehead between them, his breath warm against her skin. "I am so sorry," he whispered. "I am so desperately sorry that this happened to you, that no one protected you, that you had to endure this alone." He pressed a soft kiss to one of the scars, then another, working his way across her back. "But I promise you, Celeste, those days are over. You will never be hurt like this again. I will make certain of it." Celeste felt something breaking open inside her chest, something that had been locked away and frozen for years. It wasn't just the physical intimacy of the moment, though that was part of it. It was the emotional intimacy, the sense that someone finally saw her completely and didn't turn away. Someone witnessed her damage and called her strong. Someone touched her scars and found them worthy of tenderness rather than shame. She turned to face him, and the movement brought them inches apart. Theodore's eyes had darkened with emotion, but there was also desire there, unmistakable and honest, not despite her scars, but including them as part of who she was. He looked at her like she was beautiful, like she was desirable, like she was worth cherishing. "Theodore," she said, testing his name on her tongue, making it hers. "I want you to know that I'm choosing this. Choosing you, not because I have to, but because I want to." His hands came up to frame her face, tilting it up toward his. "Are you absolutely certain? We can wait. We have all the time in the world. I've spent 10 years being afraid," Celeste replied, her voice growing stronger. "I don't want to be afraid anymore. I want to know what it feels like to be touched with kindness. I want to replace painful memories with beautiful ones. I want to feel alive." The first touch of tenderness. Theodore lowered his mouth to hers slowly, giving her every opportunity to change her mind. When their lips finally met, it was soft and questioning at first, a gentle exploration rather than a demand. Celeste's hands found his chest, feeling the solid warmth of him beneath the fine fabric of his shirt, feeling his heart beating as rapidly as her own. The kiss deepened naturally, organically, as Celeste gained confidence. Her fingers worked at the buttons of his shirt, wanting to feel his skin against hers, wanting the equality of mutual vulnerability. Theodore helped her, shrugging out of the garment and tossing it aside. His chest was lean and muscled from physical labor at his factories, and Celeste found herself fascinated by the contrast between his body and her own. "You're staring," Theodore said with a gentle smile. "I've never seen a man without his shirt before," Celeste admitted, feeling heat rise in her cheeks. "You're rather impressive," he laughed, the sound warm and genuine, and it made something flutter in Celeste's stomach. "I could say the same about you, though I've been trying very hard to be respectful and not stare too obviously." "You can look," Celeste said, surprised by her own boldness. "I want you to look. I want you to see me, and not look away." Theodore's gaze traveled over her exposed skin with obvious appreciation. But there was something more there too. Respect, affection, wonder. He reached out and traced the curve of her collarbone, down to the swell of her breast, watching goosebumps rise in the wake of his touch. "You are exquisite," he murmured. "Every single part of you." Building trust through touche led her to the bed, that massive four-poster structure that had loomed so ominously in Celeste's imagination all evening. But now, with Theodore's hand warm in hers, it seemed less threatening. He sat on the edge and drew her to stand between his knees, his hands settling on her waist. "I want to tell you what I'm going to do," Theodore said, his thumbs stroking small circles on her skin. "So you're never surprised or frightened. I'm going to remove the rest of your clothing, and then mine. Then I'm going to lay you down on this bed and explore every inch of you with my hands and mouth until you're trembling. I'm going to find all the places that make you gasp and sigh, and I'm going to memorize them. And only when you're ready, only when you ask me to, will I join my body with yours. Does that sound acceptable? Celeste could barely breathe, her entire body flushing with heat at his words. The explicit nature of his description should have shocked her, but instead it made her feel safe. He was giving her a map of what was to come, removing the fear of the unknown. Yes, she managed. That sounds more than acceptable. True to his word, Theodore removed her remaining garments with care, followed by his own. When they were both completely bare, he took a moment to simply look at her, his expression one of awe and desire combined. Then he guided her onto the bed, settling her against the pillows before covering her body with his own, careful to support his weight. The feeling of skin against skin was overwhelming in the best possible way. Theodore kissed her deeply, while his hands began their promised exploration, learning the curves and valleys of her body. He found the sensitive spot at the base of her throat that made her arch against him. He discovered that her breasts were responsive to his touch, her nipples hardening under his fingers and mouth. He traced the curve of her waist, the flare of her hips, the soft skin of her inner thighs. Pleasure replacing pain won his hand finally, slipped between her legs. Celeste cried out at the sensation. No one had ever touched her there, and the intimacy of it was almost too much. Theodore's fingers moved with skilled precision, finding her most sensitive place and circling it with just the right amount of pressure. That's it, he encouraged as her hips began to move instinctively. Let yourself feel it. There's no shame in pleasure, Celeste. Your body was made for this, for joy and sensation and delight. The tension built inside her like a spring coiling tighter and tighter. Theodore watched her face as he worked, adjusting, his touch based on her responses, learning what made her gasp and what made her moan. When he slipped one finger inside her, then two, stretching her gently, the sensation was strange, but not unpleasant. You're so responsive, Theodore breathed, clearly affected by her reactions. So perfect. I could spend hours just watching you come undone. The spring inside Celeste wound impossibly tight, and then suddenly it released. Pleasure crashed over her in waves, stealing her breath and making her cry out Theodore's name. Her body clenched around his fingers as the sensations rolled through her, more intense than anything she had ever experienced. As she came down from the peak, trembling and breathless, Theodore kissed her softly. That was beautiful. You were beautiful. The sacred union. Celeste lay in Theodore's arms, her body still humming with aftershocks of pleasure, and felt tears sliding down her cheeks. But these were different from the tears she had shed earlier. These were tears of relief, of release, of wonder at discovering her body could feel something other than pain. Did I hurt you? Theodore asked immediately, concern flooding his features. He moved to pull away, but Celeste held him tighter. No, she assured him, her voice thick with emotion. You didn't hurt me. You gave me something I didn't think was possible. I didn't know my body could feel like that. I thought it was only capable of registering pain and fear. But you showed me differently. Theodore's expression softened, and he kissed away her tears with infinite gentleness. Your body is capable of so much more than pain, Celeste. It's capable of pleasure and joy and connection. And I intend to spend a very long time proving that to you. She felt him, hard and insistent against her hip, and realized he had given her pleasure while denying his own. The thought made her bold. Her hand moved down between their bodies, wrapping around him tentatively. Theodore groaned, his eyes falling closed at her touch. Celeste, you don't have to. I want to. She interrupted. I want to know all of you, the way you know me now. Show me what you like. The moment of truth. Theodore guided her hand, showing her the pressure and rhythm he preferred, and Celeste was fascinated by his reactions. This powerful man, this successful industrialist who commanded factories and employed hundreds, was vulnerable in her hands. The realization was heady and empowering. After several minutes, Theodore gently removed her hand. "If you keep doing that, this will be over embarrassingly quickly, and I very much want to be inside you when that happens, but only if you're ready." Celeste met his eyes and found nothing but patience and care there. He would wait if she asked him to, she realized. He would wait days, weeks, months if that's what she needed. But she didn't want to wait. She wanted to complete this connection, to replace the fear that had dominated her life with this new knowledge of intimacy and trust. "I'm ready," she said firmly. "I want this. I want you." Theodore positioned himself at her entrance, his eyes locked on hers. "This will likely hurt at first. Your body has to adjust. But I promise the pain will be brief, and if it becomes too much, you tell me to stop immediately. Promise me." "I promise," Celeste whispered, her hands gripping his shoulders. He pushed forward slowly, carefully, giving her body time to accommodate him. Celeste felt the stretch, the burn, the sharp sting as he breached her maidenhead. She gasped, her nails digging into his skin, but she didn't ask him to stop. Theodore paused when he was fully seated inside her, his jaw clenched with the effort of holding still. "Breathe," he coached, his voice strained. "Just breathe through it. Your body will adjust." Celeste focused on her breathing, on the weight of him above her, on the connection between them. Gradually, the discomfort faded, replaced by a feeling of fullness that wasn't entirely unpleasant. She shifted her hips experimentally, and Theodore groaned. "Can you move?" she asked. "I want to feel what it's supposed to feel like, dancing." In the firelight, Theodore began to move in slow, measured strokes, watching her face carefully for any sign of distress. The friction was strange at first, but with each thrust, it became more pleasurable. Celeste's body began to respond, her hips rising to meet his, finding a rhythm that felt natural and right. "That's it," Theodore encouraged, his movements becoming more confident. "You feel incredible, Celeste, so perfect." He shifted the angle slightly, and suddenly every thrust was hitting a spot inside her that sent sparks of pleasure shooting through her body. Celeste moaned, her legs wrapping around his waist instinctively, pulling him deeper. The tension began building again, faster this time, more intense. Theodore's hands slipped between their bodies, finding that sensitive bundle of nerves and circling it in time with his thrusts. The dual stimulation was overwhelming, and Celeste felt herself racing toward another peak. This one felt different, bigger, like a wave building offshore. "Theodore," she gasped, unsure what she was asking for, but knowing she needed something. "I know," he replied, his rhythm becoming more urgent. "Let go, Celeste. I've got you. Just let go." The wave crashed over her, and this time was even more intense because she wasn't alone in it. She felt Theodore follow her over the edge moments later, felt him pulse inside her as he found his own release, her name on his lips like a prayer. They collapsed together, hearts racing, bodies slick with sweat, breathing hard. Theodore rolled to his side, taking her with him, keeping them connected. He pulled the blankets over them both, cocooning them in warmth. "That was extraordinary," Celeste breathed, still trembling with aftershocks. "You are extraordinary," Theodore corrected, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "I have never experienced anything like that. And I don't think I'm capable of letting you out of this bed for at least 3 days." Planning the future, they lay together, in comfortable silence for a while, fingers tracing lazy patterns on skin. Celeste felt more at peace than she ever had in her life. But eventually, reality intruded on their private sanctuary. "What happens now?" she asked quietly, "when we leave this room and face the world?" Theodore propped himself up on one elbow, looking down at her seriously. "Now we build a life together, a real life based on partnership and mutual respect. You mentioned wanting to open a gallery. I meant what I said earlier. I will fund it. I'll help you find the perfect location, hire staff, whatever you need." "My father will never allow it," Celeste said. the familiar fear creeping back into her voice. He'll say it's inappropriate, that I'm embarrassing the family name. Your father no longer has any say over your life. Theodore replied firmly, you're under my protection now, and I actually respect your dreams and ambitions. Besides, I've already taken steps to ensure he can't interfere. Celeste's eyes widened. What do you mean? Theodora hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. I need to be honest with you about something. When we first met, I noticed things. The way you flinched when someone raised their voice. The careful way you moved, like you were always bracing for impact. The haunted look in your eyes. I suspected abuse, so I made some discreet inquiries. You investigated me. Celeste wasn't sure how to feel about that.